And thank you to everyone for coming out tonight. We have an update for you on the flood recovery that should take about 20 minutes to half an hour, and I'm staring at all the people that are going to be talking. 20 minutes to half an hour, so we can have lots of time for questions. My name is Captain Gates, and I'm the Information Officer for the Flood Recovery Team. And we will be hearing about, next slide please. So we're going to hear about the recovery priorities, some updates from the critical infrastructure side of things, including the Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund grant application. We'll be hearing a brief blurb from the Red Cross on getting in business support applications if you have a small business. We'll be hearing from the Wellness Lead as well as from the province of BC and the person preparing the response plan for 2019. No pressure there, Paul, but everyone would like to hear what you have to say. So we'll take about, we're planning an hour and a half for this meeting. So we should have about a half hour of the presentations, followed by about an hour of questions, and we'll check in along the way with the questions to see just if we need to go either shorter or longer, because we don't want to keep anyone if everyone's out of questions, but we also don't want to run too long into the night. So first up, we have Chair Rolly Russell from the Regional District, who is going to talk about the priorities.
Thank you. Can we have the next slide, please? I will start off by apologizing for my boots. I thought I had my other boots in the car, and I don't. This is one of the few occasions when I feel like I should be wearing appropriate footwear, so sorry. These are pieces you've heard before. This is the policy, our policy group, so your elected leadership has agreed to these strategic priorities. These are what we use as our test to make sure that the solutions that we're advocating for and trying to secure are appropriate for our community and helpful for you. We had a policy group meeting a couple days ago, reviewed these again and reaffirmed these strategic priorities. There's more to them. If you want to look in more detail, you can find those on the website as well. One of the pieces that has come up a number of times recently is transparency. And so I wanted to take off on, or highlight that last point there, that equitable, fair, and reasonable decisions. Captured in that, I think, is the notion of transparency. And in our policy group meeting, we also reiterated our desire to make sure that you recognize that our intention is to be as transparent as possible and to release everything that we are working on unless there is some material risk, so some risk that we see in sharing that information that is significant. So just to clarify, that statement has been made again by the policy group. We spent a lot of time discussing, if there is need to withhold anything from providing to the public. And essentially, the outcome of that conversation was to say, no, we want to share everything we have to share, as long as it doesn't, it's not private information or put somebody at risk, okay? And so I just wanted to reiterate that piece. And the one other thing that we had a meeting over the last, I guess, what day is it today? Thursday? Yeah, Tuesday. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Parliamentary Secretary Rice, Jennifer Rice, who is our appointed, we went down in October to the provincial government. We said we need to have a conduit into your political decision-making process that does not require us speaking to all the individual ministries. After that meeting, before we got back to Grand Forks even, they had appointed Parliamentary Secretary Rice to be our conduit into the provincial government. She spent the last, a good chunk of yesterday and the day before in the community, meeting our flood recovery team, getting a sense of the issues, much of the same information that we present here at these meetings. That was a really productive session for her. And one piece that, where's Chris? Chris, at the end of that all, he was making a comment that I think was really, really kind of astute, which was to thank the province for the degree of senior political leadership that we have seen engaged in this community, and he summed it up better than I'll be able to sum it up, but you know, we've seen Premier Horgan here, we've seen Minister Farnworth here multiple times, we've seen Parliamentary Secretary Rice here 4, maybe 5 times now. We've seen a lot of presence from our political leadership in Vancouver. Linda Larson has been here. All of those people as well have given us a significant amount of face time in Victoria. In Whistler, we met with a lot of those people, including the Premier, including a number of the ministers, municipal affairs and housing, public safety, agriculture. And so it's a point that I think we ought to celebrate in terms of how much connection we've had there and how well that has helped us build that partnership with the province to try to build through and create these solutions that we're getting. So I wanted to echo that point. Like I said, Chris said it better yesterday, but thank you. That's it.
Evening, Graham Watt, for those who haven't seen me up here a few times before. Thanks for coming out again. So one of the key points that Rolly, Chair Russell just mentioned is the release of information, the planning work that's gone into the Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund grant and other grant programs. We still have to take some information to City Council to prepare for review. What we're going to do tonight is briefly go over the overall project timeline and look at the major projects and when roughly they would occur. I know a lot of you are thinking about when might the buyouts happen and that kind of thing, so we'll just kind of introduce that over schedule, what was in the grant, and then looking forward to our coming update meetings for more details on other aspects. But I think we have, next slide please. So DMAF stands for Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund. Mitigation means making something bad not as bad. So when you have disaster, if you can do something to prevent that from happening like that again in the future. Critical infrastructure is our keyword for, would you like to share your note with the entire class? Or?
But actually what we were talking about is I think you had asked me to present this
really?
piece, and so that's what we were trying to figure out. Do we interrupt you? Does it matter or not? So that's all. So if you're comfortable doing, go ahead.
I'm totally comfortable. Okay. You can jump in and...
I'm happy to.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Critical infrastructure refers to those core municipal, local government, and in some cases provincial government assets that provide municipal services like fire flows through water mains or major roadways, bridges, that kind of thing. And the protection of those from future floods is the core of a lot of the work that the city's leading through this grant application. Critical infrastructure actually comes second though to public safety. And so that aspect of making sure that people aren't in harm's way and allowing first responders to be able to access neighborhoods during future flooding. Paul Edmonds will be speaking a little bit more about our planning work in that regard tonight, but this is about the grants. So next slide, please. Oh, that comes out really washed out. I'll have to dance it. There's several components. The top line up there is calendar dates, and the bar on the left there is June 2019, so June of this year. The bar on the far right is June 2023. So that's a 5-year timeline for this Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund. There's just under $50 million of projects were submitted under this umbrella to the federal government under a federal provincial funding framework, submitted on January 11th. And the major categories on the left, I'll go through them and kind of talk about from when to when they'll be happening. So property acquisition and negotiation is the first category. Johnson Flats Channel stabilization, downtown trail dike, North Ruckle diking, trail behind Rockwell, Granby trail dike, South Ruckle diking, South Ruckle stormwater, rural riverbank stabilization, Granby road raise, and North Ruckle dike removal. So that is the list of projects that's within the Disaster Mitigation Adaptation Fund. Last summer, there were some other projects that were identified, and the core point of some of them didn't fit within the grant criteria. of this granting, or they didn't fit within the total funding available. Some of them require further analysis with the floodplain model that our consultant Urban Systems is working on right now. So this isn't the entire list of everything that will be worked on over the next 5 years of mitigation work, but this is what fits into this particular grant that we just applied for. There was another grant that we applied for late last summer for the east side of downtown, stormwater infrastructure and diking. So the timelines, starting with property acquisition, I think, which is everyone here is keenly interested in. Once funding is confirmed, we're hoping in May, we'd be looking at starting in June and basically going over an 18-month period. We would want that phase to be wrapped up by the end of 2020, so December 2020. But it gives a period of time where it's not going to be, just over in a matter of months. There will be, likely quite a bit of discussion, negotiation, contracts, all that kind of stuff that happens. There's only a few places in the overall plan where any acquisition would need to happen right at the beginning. For most of it, it will be kind of spread through that timeline with a bit of flexibility. We don't have the details on that yet, and that's actually one reason. I know some of you heard about the proposed meeting for people who had the appraisals. We're postponing that because we want to work with the province to get a little bit better idea about the next steps and what that framework would look like, because we don't have a lot of information yet on what that will look like yet. So we'll get back to you on when that meeting will be. The request to City Council has been discussed a few times. I think now that the grant is in, it's something that will be discussed, but as we get into detailed project planning, looking at how those land acquisition pieces will look at, knowing that it's end calendar 2020 is when it would be wrapped up. That's the project, but keeping in mind that there's a few sites where it might be required earlier. Next on the list, there's some work in Johnson Flats on the west side, a couple of spots where I don't have the full list in my head, so I'm not going to get into too much details, but that work needs to happen in 2019 because of erosion concerns. Downtown diking engineering would be happening this year, and permitting and that kind of thing. The construction work would happen August, September in 2020. North Ruckle diking on 68th Avenue and that kind of thing would be happening. Design work would be happening this year. Construction work in 2020, and so on for Trail Dike behind Rockwall. Getting further along into 2020-21, the Granby Trail Dike, South Ruckle diking, South Ruckle stormwater, and then rural work, stabilization. It would be kind of initiated now and carried on over the next few years. And then finally the North Ruckle dike removal towards the end of the timeline. So these aren't set in stone, these are proposed timelines that are for the overall project. Expect finer details as we get, after the grant is announced and there's detailed work coming this summer. Gavin or Rolly, is there anything that you'd want to add to my brief overview? Thumbs up, okay, cool. Next slide, please. Some successes. I mentioned the bottom one already, but Midway, there was a couple of critical infrastructure projects out there, a water line and a sewer line that were threatened by erosion at a bridge. Those projects are now complete. Popped by the other day, and it's nice to see something checked off and done. So that's kind of a major repair project, and our critical infrastructure team at the city, together with the regional district and village of Midway, worked hard on getting all that stuff done together, and it's good to see that work going ahead. Another piece, a major project that we're getting into the detailed design on, trying to get ready for in advance of spring runoff this year is the South Ruckle Bank stabilization. So extending from the upstream side, the beach by 9th Street in South Ruckle, around the corner to the where the pathway and the water line is around the corner. The survey was completed around Christmas time, and in some cases the amount of land lost was 10 or 11 meters, or 30, 35 feet. That's how much land disappeared in there. Of course, there's a few houses that are threatened by that, as well as the infrastructure there. So this is a major priority to try and get done, because the erosion that is actively occurring as the water rises, threatens all of those sites. The city and regional district applied for funding to start the engineering work before Christmas and purchase the rock because the rock needs to be quarried. That process is now underway, and the detailed design for exactly how it's going to be aligned and how it'll get put in the stream before the water rises, that work is underway right now. So it's a huge success that we're in the middle of trying to achieve. You'll see a lot of activity there. And then the Disaster Mitigation Adaptation Fund. So I think I wanted to talked about some of the projects that are on the overall project list. I also mentioned some aspects need further study and further analysis, but there's also quite a bit of work where we're actively in dialogue with the province, with Emergency Management BC, with Forest Lands and Natural Resource Operations about how the other aspects of recovery as reinvestment work. So there's additional pieces of infrastructure programs and bank protection and floodplain protection that we'll need help on, and we need to put a framework around that. So I did want to give the opportunity for Ron Burleson here. He's with Recovery with Emergency Management BC. He had a couple of thoughts, I guess, about how this might look. Thank you. You can hop on over to it.
I'm sorry, but I got to put this on a stand because usually when I'm in a church, I'm doing the second reading, but so just bear with me, old habits.
I think next slide, please.
Yeah, let's see what this looks like. Okay, good. So thanks, Graham, and good evening, everyone. I know I've been in front of you, all a few times in the last 6 or 7 months, but as Graham mentioned, my name's Ron Burleson. I'm Exec Director of Disaster Recovery for the province of BC. I've also been assigned to be the provincial lead for Grand Forks Recovery, and as Rolly mentioned, there's, at the political level, a lot of attention being paid, and we structurally within the civil service are organizing ourselves around that as well. We pulled together a very strong cross-agency team to support your locally led recovery work, and it's been a real privilege to work with this community. So while we continue to collectively work on immediate needs throughout the winter and into spring, we're adding focus. We're not taking away focus, but we're adding focus to the long term. So Graham's outlined the scope of the DMAF proposal, which will go a long way to achieving a sustainable long-term solution, but we do expect that some things are outside of the scope of DMAF. Excuse me. So Graham mentioned some of the projects that either didn't fit the criteria or had to be moved because of funding caps, but there's also things that we would anticipate, possibly land or other infrastructure things that we need to accommodate. So what we're working on collectively is a project charter that will help us make sure that we capture everything so that I can get the mandate I need from the province and Graham through his leaders, and we can make sure that for that 5-year scope that we land where we need to land. So we don't know all the future solution yet, but these are things we really have to work through, and I think you've heard throughout this recovery that this is new for everybody. I mean, we have not done this before, so there's a lot of things to figure out, and we're grateful to have access to resources from other jurisdictions, and but this has to be a made in Grand Forks solution. So kudos to everyone who's continuing to work on this, and thank you for your patience as we go down this road. So thanks, Graham.
Thank you, Ron. That's incredible to be able to work with Ron on these activities.
I didn't actually even speak to this slide.
Sure, if you want to go for it. Yeah.
So the concept here is that if the DMAF proposal did everything, it would be as big as the rest of the circle. But we know that there are things that are outside of DMAF, and so we just need to make sure we're going forward really with all those things in mind, and scoping things out so that we go and ask for what we need to do it properly. So sorry about that.
That's perfect.
Went to my notes and totally ignored the slide.
No, that's good. One of the things that the province is doing right now, a concurrent project, and we've had some initial discussions with them, but they're revamping the emergency management legislation and policies over the next year and a half. And the big focus of that is how recovery works, because there's a lot of policy gaps, legislative gaps, about how the province is supposed to fund different aspects of what we're doing and how it should work in the future. So we're learning through the Grand Forks, through the Caribou examples, through the other things that are happening, and sharing information back and forth with the province and Ron, as well as many of his counterparts who are working on that parallel process.
Okay, next slide, please. We're going to have some notes from our wellness lead, Darren Pratt, who is the Executive Director for Boundary Family Services.
So if I can actually have the case manager stand up, please, just so there can be a familiarization with the faces once again. Christopher. So the team has been actually really active for the last 6 weeks. They did take a break over Christmas, but they're kind of making it happen. So right now what we did is we went through the initial 50 list of our triage concerns. So right now we're actually accepting referrals directly. So the case managers are here for system navigation, advocacy, and referrals. So if you, as a flood affected resident, or any of your family members that you have concerns about that are primarily flood affected, we can now take point in time referrals. So feel free to call 442-2267 or the 1877 number for the West Boundary folks, and within 12 hours they'll contact. Rachel, do you have anything that you wanted to add? Anyway, pass the mic, so let the case managers introduce themselves real quick.
My name is Petra Nielsen. Teresa Taylor.
I'm Rachel Warner.
And Christopher Stevenson.
Okay, so what Darren had said, and I'll sum up in less words, is if you don't feel like you can handle some of the flood stuff, you need a helping hand, you need someone to explain something to you, or to go to bat for you, call them. So there's the 2 numbers up there, and they'll hook you up with a caseworker for an intake. Next slide, please, and we will have Alina up. So the Red Cross has been very generous with their time and their money, of course, in Grand Forks, and they haven't been able to give it all away. So Alina is going to explain to small businesses how they can get some extra help in applying for that money.
Kevin. So my name is Alina Konevsky. I'm the Red Cross manager for BC Floods based in Grand Forks. So it's actually a partnership program with the Red Cross and the province of BC. And the funding is certainly coming from the province for a support to small business program. So many of you, I think, probably already know about it or have accessed it, but we do have an application process and funding available for businesses far and wide financially impacted by the flood. You don't have to have actually had flood waters on your business, it's financial impact. And it's within the regional district of Kootenay boundary, so all the way up to the west boundary. I'm working closely with Chris, the case manager out there, to identify businesses that we can inform about this program. I encourage them to apply, and certainly all the way up to Christina Lake. So I encourage you to take a look at our website. So we have had the program manager for this program, it's not me, somebody else, that comes to town and is available for in-person assistance, essentially, or in-person guidance on how to fill out the application form, on support you on wherever you're stuck, that you're missing this document, whatever. She's going to help you, and she can help you with that. So she's already been here for 2 weeks. She was here last week for a whole week, and she was here in December, and so she's coming back next week, the whole week, and then every 2 weeks, so the 2 weeks after that, and then actually the last week of February. It's really small font, so this information is on the website as well, and I can give you guys that address. But the last week of February, our business manager is going to be in Rock Creek, directly supporting all the West Boundary folks up there. Okay, so I'm hoping that'll capture more people. Yeah, the application form is online. If you have any questions on how to access it, or the website, or any of that, I don't want to rattle it off right now, but just come find me after, and I'll write it down for you. Okay, and I'll be available later for questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Alina. Next slide, please. So we're very fortunate to have the assistance of Paul for preparing the response plan for the regional district, sorry, for the boundary portion of the regional district. Wait, and the other side?
Regional district.
For the regional district. I was right the first time. Excellent. And so he's going to tell us about the process, about what's going on for next year, so that it'll be a little bit different from from 2018, and we'll get more details as we get closer on into March. But this is an introduction to what's going on with that plan.
Hello there, as Kevin introduced me, my name is Paul Edmonds. I think you may have met me last year when I came in to help with strategic planning. I hope you can understand my accent. I'm obviously from Wales, UK, where I was a strategic incident commander under the Association of Chief of Police Officers for federal incidents. I landed last year in BC, so I'm only freshly into BC. I was in Canada before that, but I was actually landed into the Emergency Operations Centre Director for the Oak Island and Similkameen incidents of the floods, fires and landslides that they held. And I can see this as a success that through the Regional Emergency Programme, EMBC have funded me to work with Regional Emergency, the Emergency Manager and the Boundary Flood Recovery Team. Obviously, freshet is coming against us. Nobody really knows what is expected. And part of my role is to try and give you that information. And you can see on the slide, one of the last bullet points is communicate risk. We know there's a risk, but we actually don't know the level of risk for this year. Everybody talks about the blob in the Pacific Ocean and its influence in the rainfall events, the weather, how warm it'll be, how much snow it is. So we're going to try and distill that down into understandable information releases. And the first one went out on Monday onto the BFR website and the RDKB, yes, thank you, to talk about what it means about flooding, how you can be prepared and where you can get that information, because there is so much information out there, but you need to find it. And I think it's my job to try to give you that information. There's some web links on the information release, but over the next few weeks and February and March, we'll actually be breaking that down into manageable chunks of information for you to be aware. One of the things we're actually doing, we're working with the River Forecast Centre and other ministries and obviously the local governments, municipalities to rehearse what's going to happen. So I've gone out and understand the trigger points that's required using local information as well as the hydrologists and the engineers. Look at where the evacuations took place, look at what actually got wet, and then looking at what emergency measures could be put in place for those areas. And I'll be very honest with you, some areas could have emergency measures and some areas cannot have emergency measures, which is the latter, unfortunately, is evacuation. But we need to communicate that as we go forward. So I think that's important for you to realise how much information will be coming over the next few months. One of the things I just want to say is we are also thinking about doing some community workshops. There was, I don't know how many 100,000 sandbags, 600,000 sandbags went out, and large tiger dams throughout Grand Forks. We actually thought about doing it perhaps in March, a community workshop of actually seeing the correct way to put sandbags up. Obviously, you've all been experienced with this, but sometimes it's useful to see it in an example rather than do a very tactical sandbag approach to your doorways, around your houses and things. And we'll obviously be communicating where you can find sand and sandbags, and obviously what the response plan is. I put my email address up there because one of the things that we actually want to do is have some local input to that plan. If you've got your own ideas about trigger points or information that people need, please feel free to email me. Don't email me if it's an emergency though, because I won't be monitoring that daily, that email address, but I will come back to you personally. I think that's about it at the moment. I hopefully now in the next few weeks there'll be another press release with a little bit more in-depth information for you, just to you digest responsibilities of homeowners, responsibilities of government, responsibilities of ministries, and again a little bit more information on where to find snowpack information, river flow information, and what triggers we are looking at. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Next slide, please. So now it's time for your questions. We'll do the same thing that we've done before with a couple of mic runners to bring a microphone to you. And we'll see how that goes. We'll alternate sides unless one side has all the people that have the questions, in which case we'll start concentrating on that side. So I know I had one person with the mic, Rachel, and I'm actually going to give this mic to Chris, if you want to wave, Chris, and then I'm going to steal the third mic back from Rolly and get it to Graham to start off with some answers. So can we start off with a question from this side?
I recently spoke to a friend of mine up Christian Valley, and they knew long before Grand Forks did how much water was coming. What have you got in place that you can connect with people up to Granby, Christian Valley, or up Beaverdale to say, hey, we got a tsunami coming? Have you done anything like that yet?
That's a good question. So there's been, maybe I'll pass it on to Paul in a moment, but there's, in the Christian Valley and the West Kettle, there's a couple of small stream flow monitoring stations, Lost Horse Creek, up the Christian Valley, and up near McCulloch on the West Kettle River, and they start running a bit before you see the water rise at Westbridge. There's also monitoring stations there. So I can pass it on to Paul for more details. He's going to be doing some checking with all the rural fire folks and that kind of thing to see what they saw and connect with the community, but if you want to elaborate.
Yeah, you bring up a very good point. Sorry, can you wave your hand because I was unfortunately sitting down. There, thank you. One of the things I want to make sure is having that local information, because just as Graham says, when you see some of the creeks rising, you'll get some long-term indicators of what the main river will do. And if we include those in the trigger points, we can actually work with the Flynn Road staff to put staff gauges there, rather than look at branches on trees, which is great for local information. But working with the fire chiefs, they can go around and inspect those depending on what the rivers are doing to get that low to medium term risk assessment. There's a couple of creeks that I've been made aware of that give you perhaps a week's notice of what the main river is doing. So all that information is going to be very valuable.
Graham, on your production schedule, for the lack of a better term, you had mentioned something to do with diking in Johnson Flats. Sorry, Barry Jarvis, I live in Johnson Flats. But you weren't specific. Can you be a little more specific as what you're talking about for bank erosion?
Bank protection, and I might actually have to rest on potentially Kevin, who maybe saw the maps in more detail than I did for that area.
So in Johnson Flats, and it's not diking, it's erosion protection.
Right.
So the idea being that the river channel won't migrate any or won't slough off the bank. And so right now there were a few spots identified, if you can think, just by, what road is it? 66, I think is the end of that road, kind of just on north of Bill's house there. And
59th, 60th.
59th is the last cross street.
No, north of that.
60th?
60 and 61st?
Yeah.
61st is where the power line runs.
That's right.
No, it's still a bit north of that. And anyhow, just right as you're coming around the bend into Johnson Flats on the river. So coming around that bend, you start to see some erosion on the sides. And so you can really see, a couple feet or 3-4 feet that were lost last year, and that's just sloughing that's starting to come on down. So spots like that where there's active erosion sites, those will be targeted for either a structural erosion protection, which is usually riprap, and then seeing if you can actually plant things in that riprap. Or if it's appropriate, and it depends on how fast the water moves on that site, looking at using what they kind of lump together and call bioengineering, but it just means using plants to stabilize the riverbank.
I'm just confused as to exactly where you're talking about. Are you talking south of 61st Avenue, which is where the gas line crosses the river and the power line crosses the river?
No. So there's quite a stretch. There was about at least 1.5 kilometers along there, but where I was talking about just now is is, do you know the shingle house, the nice wood shingle house?
Well, you're talking on the west, you're talking on the west side.
That's right,
of Johnson Flats, not on the east side.
And there are some spots on the east side as well, but one of the main focuses in what I was
You're kind of like asking my wife for directions.
I will add, one of the pieces that we were going to mention earlier is, so as Ron pointed out, right, the DMAF application is a big bundle of projects.
Yes.
It's not everything, but it's a big bundle of projects. That application came forward from the City of Grand Forks as the owner of kind of that, moving that forward. The City of Grand Forks, I believe it's on Monday, is having an in-camera meeting to review that whole proposal for release. And so that project, once they look at that and make sure there's nothing in there, like I spoke about earlier, that would create risk for some kind of future scenario in terms of private individual information, so on and so forth. That would then, in turn, once that review has taken place, then a lot of the much more specific details will come out after the council has reviewed that.
So what you're telling me, Rolly, is my question is premature.
Yeah, it'll be an easier answer than Kevin's explanation.
Thanks for the vote of confidence there, Ron. But yes, we will have more details to come, and a little bit premature. If you remember back to the slide that was hard to read that Graham had there with the timelines, there was a bunch of planning and then looking at initial implementation.
That's what brought it to my attention.
Yeah.
Not a slide I couldn't read.
That's right. Yeah. So the one that you couldn't read that you got just enough detail to ask about, we don't have more details on, but we're looking at getting some of that.
Thank you. This one is also about the planning for the freshet. How much detail are you doing on that locally in terms of people that are shut in, people that are in wheelchairs that will need evacuation? Like, are you doing that type of detail?
Yeah, part of the plan is actually understanding the vulnerable community and what's required if you have to go to evacuation. So that's been looked at as part of the overall flood response plan. There's been I'm going to speak on behalf of the Regional Emergency Programme here. They have actually applied for a grant for more detailed analysis for demographics and in many different areas, but for the flood response plan, if you got wet and it's in the trigger areas, those demographics will be looked at.
Hi. I did appreciate the urgency that was to get the ask in to the provincial government and so on. But my question is now, are other alternatives being considered? Like, because I'm caught in one of these places where I'm damned either way. They're putting a dike through my house or it's being reclaimed as flood. And the river did not breach my property. It came in the back door, so yeah, there were proposals put out there such as, diversions for the river and stuff. Are any of these other things being considered at this point in time? Or is it, we're just going to assume
yeah,
the worst?
It's a really good question. So there's two parts to the question. Last summer, there were several options evaluated at course level, things like diversions. The idea of a reservoir upstream was brought up, and they were analyzed to the extent to see if they were within the realm of feasibility. The idea of a flood diversion canal south of Grand Forks was looked at. Just the trucking costs alone to remove the amount of gravel to make a channel in that area would have been over $100 million. Let alone to deal with the intake structure and outlet structure in the river and essentially creating a dam on that end to have an intake structure. There's some basic feasibility things that weren't possible. It might be, if this was Winnipeg, it might be possible. As you know, they did a major diversion for the Red River, but for the scale here, it's not going to be a return on investment that was possible. Public safety and protection of critical infrastructure is one part of it. The other is having more room for the river to spill out and move around. So areas where acquisition of land and reinvestment in the floodplain functioning, that was kind of the central idea behind what the council resolved on, what the engineers were recommending last summer, and they were actually a perfect alignment with this grant opportunity. Now, the second part of the question is, these are the application that went in, they're preliminary engineering, and there's fine tuning to come with detailed design. So some things in terms of, you know, how high will this berm be? Will there be access to driveways over there? How will it affect the stormwater in this spot? Those detailed questions are still to be analyzed and resolved. We're waiting within the next month or so, we'll have the results of a floodplain study that the city undertook just before last year's flood, and there will be a detailed analysis to help fine-tune question. And I know where you're coming from on that perspective. Is some of these things seem early, and they are because we had to get within this grant opportunity. But we're looking forward to some more detailed analysis and detailed engineering through the rest of this year for all the projects.
If you're looking for more room for water for the river, why not remove material from the river and use that to build your dikes? Then you accomplish two things without incurring all these trucking costs.
It's a really good question. So a lot of the material in the river is a particular type of gravel. There's a lot of restrictions now on dredging, and the type of material that you get might not be suitable for some of the dikes. But the other problem that is identified is during a flood, that material will fill in again within half a day to a day how much sediment is actually moving on the bed of the river. So in some sites it might be a really good option, but then 3 years later need to be done again, or the next year need to be done again, depending on how much is moving through. So engineers have looked at this at a preliminary level, but don't see it as a permanent solution. And permanent solutions is the only thing we're going to get funding for.
I disagree, but that's okay.
My name is Michael Surf from the Country Hideaway campground. We're out on Mountain Meadows. I saw a reference to rural up there. To date, I don't know, we haven't seen it, but I was told at one point that out towards that area we were going to maybe, they were being dealt with on a separately than a lot of the things, because maybe it was unique. I mean, I don't know, it flooded like a lot of the rest of the area, so I don't really see it as being unique. I don't know, Rolly, you probably, I mean, you're out there. Is there any plans for that Edwards Road, Manly Meadows? How far, I guess the question is, how far should we go before we start putting too much more money into mitigation, if there's going to be something happening down the road that possibly the emergency management or RDKB, or if there's anything actually planned for that. We are 3 months away and waiting.
And I think what I might even do is pass it to Chris Marsh here. One thing I'll briefly speak about, there was many kilometers of river length in the rural area that were identified for erosion protection, and some estimates went in for funding application. Of course, that won't be due till later, but Chris is working directly on a lot of the rural area files, and I think would be able to speak to that one in particular.
Yeah, Chris Marsh used to be, out of the corner in the center of the room, was the manager of emergency programs for the RDKB. Recently taken on a position as Deputy Flood Recovery Manager under the Boundary Flood Recovery. We've had my position backfilled so that the day-to-day operations of emergency management in this region can continue. So, Manly Meadows, we've talked before about your property. It's a very, very challenging location. As we know, the road out there has been rebuilt 4 or 5 times. It's been raised every time a little bit. It's been armored. It's a challenging location, and there's certainly certain levels of risk for certain properties there now. I know you operate the campground there, and it's, you know, you've had significant challenges over the last few years. We went looking for information about the level of risk for those properties in particular. We did get some detail back, but I can't say that we have enough information about make specific decisions about some of those properties, and yours being one of them. There are other properties out there that you guys will know be fairly familiar with that had incredible amounts of damage, and even to this day we have significant concerns about risk. So Paul's been out there with myself to analyze some of the options that we have around some of those locations. We do have some ideas around how we can maintain access there so we can make it safer for people to get in and out, which leads to some of the decisions we make around evacuation alerts and orders. But as is the case with a lot of the rural properties, there's just not enough information yet to make hard and fast decisions about those properties. So we'll continue to work on that, and you know, flood response plan is going to help us with some not necessarily some mitigation options, but some options around public safety and how we can keep people safe. So it's an incomplete answer, I know, but we'd be happy to talk to you guys offline and see what your specific concerns are.
Oh, absolutely, thank you.
Hello, I live at the north end of Johnson Flats, right by the creek. Yes. And we've been flooded for 2 years in a row. And the riverbank is no higher than the river hardly. It comes across the field every time. So I'm just wondering what the plan is to try and protect the north end of Johnson Flats from being flooded again this year, because the bank's even higher this year because it's filled in with gravel. Can you give me an answer?
So for this year, there isn't any work that will be happening before the flood for the north end of Johnson Flats, other than emergency preparedness, you know, the sandbagging, that kind of thing, that we can refer that to Paul and to the emergency program. Over the long term, there's some measures identified for Johnson Flats, and we'll be coming out with more detail. The properties that flood most regularly at the lowest line point of land are on the identification for areas that would be, you know, brought back to floodplain. So the long-term answer is looking for a permanent solution. The other aspect of it is not all rural lands are able to be protected under this grant. So we're looking at the various ways that the water moves across that landscape through our flood model that we'll be getting this spring. So I think some more information will come out of that analysis. I know it's not a complete answer for you right now. We know of the problem. We're looking for permanent solutions, and we'll be working on the emergency preparedness to protect people's life safety in the event of the flood.
But even when we sandbagged all our doors and up the walls with plastic and everything. But we have a sand crawl space. So the water didn't come in the doors and stuff as much as it did come up through the floor and the trap in our laundry room. So is there any way we can protect our property from just the groundwater, like it comes up through the ground too much instead of just coming in through the doors and etc.?
Sure. We'll refer this on to Paul, who's looking at some options that property owners have.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that we want to release next month of actually what you can do, whether it's actually traps you can put in place or covers on the drains. Some tiles, know where they are, and your crawl spaces and basement. So we are thinking of releasing that information. But I can have a chat with you afterwards.
Okay.
In terms of protecting property, is there any opportunity to get the 1 cubic meter sandbags?
What that onto your pedals? Here. The 1 cubic meter. This is resources and materials needed question.
So by one cubic meter sandbags, you mean in the big bags that you sometimes see in the builders' home depot?
Yeah, those are the bags I'm talking about.
Yeah. So they do work in certain circumstances if you have a good operator, because obviously If you ever move one of those bags with a machine, if they're not abutted properly, there will be gaps. And it's very hard to actually make sure they're watertight. So if we are going to use large ton bags, we need good operators who are trained. One of the things we're looking at for emergency measures is sandbags are very labour intensive. Tiger dams are much easier with trained crew, and people can be trained very quickly on tiger dams. But there's also gabions of different types, HESCO bins. But I know there has been occasions in BC they've used ton bags, but it does boil down to the operator in question. I've seen those walls collapse because of that. And when you're putting people behind such a measure, you have to ensure as an emergency manager that that measure is being put there with best available skills, and it's got to be inspected. So it is one of the measures that we're looking at, but it's got to be site circumstances only. They're very, very good at deflecting flow rather than protection.
Yeah, because I need to do something with my property until I get some kind of permanent solution. I've lost enough land, but I've got to keep the water away. And it's going to take an awful lot of small sandbags.
It would, yes, and many, many days of hard work. And if it's a personal preparedness, it may well be a very good option for you, because you have a vested interest in making sure they have watertight. There's no gaps.
Agreed.
Yes, yeah. So rather than a workforce going around and putting 100 in a row, there will be gaps. But,
are they going to be available, the bags?
I know it was discussed last year with the emergency manager in BC, and they did come back with saying that if municipalities and local governments wish to purchase them and provide them to residents, it's a cost for the local government and the municipalities. It wasn't to be provided by the province, but we can certainly go back and ask again.
And I'm referring certain things away. I'm on the lead in recovery efforts, a lot of these to do with response efforts, and actually it might be a good opportunity just to, Mark Stevens here from Regional District Kootenay Battery recently joined as emergency program manager, and he's working directly with Paul on that project, as well as Chris is dealing with ongoing recovery aspects of the response plan. So they're kind of the leads, and recommendations that lead to resourcing decisions that the RDKB would flow through them. So,
I think Mark is going to stand up.
Do you want to stand up and say hi?
Good evening, everyone. I am Mark Stevens. I am the interim manager of emergency programs for the regional district.
And we had also the pleasure with working with Mark last year for a short time in the Emergency Operations Center, and very much enjoyed that. So. There's a couple of questions. There's one at the back.
One right here.
Who has the extra mic now? Right there. Okay, there we go. Yeah. Okay.
Hi. I remember the city saying that they would buy a lot of these wasted houses. And have they done anything about that? And is it the 81 million or something coming in?
That's a good question. So the certain neighborhoods in Grand Forks were identified for being returned to the floodplain. So North Ruckle, a portion of South Ruckle for drainage works, but just against kind of the old Oxbow, and a small part of Johnson Flats. There's a number of properties that were heavily damaged or destroyed in the were areas outside of that, and this part of the funding application that was submitted at the beginning of January, it only had in that list within the overall project a certain number of the houses. There weren't enough resources in that grant to buy out every house and that kind of thing. There's ongoing discussion about how to help in circumstances where insurance or disaster financial assistance could not help support households, and we know there's a lot of people still impacted by this. So I think a good place to start for people in that circumstance is to work with a case manager and identify what the needs are and what the gaps are. There are some voluntary crews coming to town to work on house rebuilding over the next year to 2 years, and there's other resources that we're looking at getting in. But I don't think that I don't think that all houses that were heavily damaged will be able to be bought out. It will be depending on whether or not there's a case to be made for returning that area to floodplain. It's a really, really important question, but and also I know disappointing for some people. So.
And can I please jump in and clarify too? Correct me if I'm wrong, city councilors. The motion that the city council passed was not to buy out houses. The motion that city council passed was to pursue funding to try to get down that path as far as they could for those areas that were at particularly high risk. Okay, and that's a really important distinction. So the city council did not make a decision to say we're going to buy out a bunch of homes. They made a decision to try to get there through partnership with whatever kind of funding opportunities they'd be able to secure. Okay, so it's a big distinction because right now, you know, there's a bundle of that's included in that DMAF application. We still don't know if that DMAF application is going to be successful.
And so there's been no purchases yet either. So that's no funding yet.
Thank you. For those who don't know me, I'm Christine Thompson, Councillor for the City of Grand Forks. And the resolutions that Council put forward were not specifically that we were going to do anything. We were going to advocate. And that's what we did at UBCM. That's what we're continuing to do. Well, through the Graham and the Boundary Flood Recovery team. The city is not going to ask the taxpayers from the city to buy you out because that would not be fair to the rest of the taxpayers. But we are advocating for to get grant monies, to get, and I did say to get the pre-flood value plus whatever expenditures you incurred to make your house livable again for the interim time. And so that application has gone in, and hopefully we will get the funding to do what we can, but I can't make promises that we can't keep. So that's what we're working towards.
I guess my question is that we keep hearing about response rather than prevention. And to me, this seems precedent setting, not just for Grand Forks, but for all of BC, for all of Canada. We are built on rivers. We just are. That is how goods got in and out. What are they going to do? Buy out all of Delta? All of Pitt Meadows? Well, yeah, I don't get it. There has to be something. The monies, in my opinion, need to go towards diking, prevention, not response and sandbags. Sorry.
I think permanent solutions is one of the principles identified as part of the recovery options. And if the proposed works were here before this flood, it wouldn't have prevented all damage, but it would have prevented a large part of the damage and prevented a lot of the losses. Dikes, in many cases, at some point will be overtopped, even if it's built to the best standard of the current day. You know, there's a case in Colorado where they've had multiple 500-year floods within a 30-year time span. And so getting people out of harm's way is the second thing. And even then, all of the flood insurance maps for Houston didn't identify all the areas uphill that flooded in the last hurricane. And so, you know, we still need to be very much focused on response and being able to deal with all the areas that don't have protection. And then should the protection fail, how do we work in those neighborhoods too? There's always the potential that engineering can fail. So both will always go together in hand. But permanent long-term solutions are hopefully a way to start undoing the 100 years of planning without knowledge of floodplains that happened before we got to this point.
Hi, I'm thinking about people who were flooded and are back in their homes right now, or some who have some things stored in parts of their homes that were flooded. And I saw the bulletin from 2 days ago, and it talked about moving things and sump pumps and doing some work. Another thing on my mind has been about level of risk. And in our community, we're learning more about the role of trees and how they help decrease the risk with if snow is on their branches, and more snow can go into the air rather than be melting when there's different temperature changes, or they soak up things from the ground. Now, one thing I learned about recently was in the Boundaries to Milk meeting, they were talking about their watershed being saturated, and in reports they were talking about creeks up high in the watershed that are running in the winter that usually are dry in the winter. So they were thinking that their ground soaked up the water and it doesn't have room to absorb more, and so that increases their risk of flooding this year. And I've been asking questions, but I don't think we have clarity as to whether that is an element of risk for us right now. But so I'm kind of thinking about these different things, and I know more logging was done this summer. So, and it does take a bit of work for people to go through all those things and advanced preparation to move things around. So I'm wondering, I'm hoping there will be a little bit of research to see if there are creeks that are running, if it looks like things are saturated up there, whether there is more of an increased risk, and whether we need to do more preparations earlier to move things around in homes. So that's the first part of the question, but I think I'd like to say the whole thing first. The other thing is, if people are going to be setting up systems, right, with sump pumps and different things and moving water to lower areas, this involves also more investment for people. Will there be a fund? Can we set up a fund to help people for that particular preparations for flood protection in advance? So we're sort of thinking about that, if that's what we're facing again for these different reasons, if there's possible saturation and increased logging, and if we're getting a lot more snow, you never know, right? Thank you.
Yes, so the first part of the question, I was actually standing in the room when the engineers and myself were talking about the amount of water that's in the Okanagan-Similkameen area. So the groundwater levels are very high there. There are creeks which are running which people have never seen before in 30 or 40 years. I'm sure they did run before because you can see the landscape quite plainly. But there is a different type of geology, it's a different type of catchment. To give you an idea, and this is it's very unfortunate for the people involved, 10 millimeters of rain at the moment will cause flooding of 17 homes. So they don't need much, the sponge is very full in that particular catchment. And usually, to give you a scale, in the spring, that creek is around about 2 meters wide. So it's a very large catchment, it doesn't see a lot of water, but the last 2 years it's had an immense amount of water because the top catchments have just filled up. And there's cattle lakes up there, and in fact there was 6 reservoirs that had to undergo emergency discharge. So it was a huge sponge full of water and it's just overtopping. The Kettle and Granby rivers are very different to that. We are looking at groundwater levels, and your information about local creeks are perfect for me to fit into the triggers. So when we talk about low to medium levels of risk for if a creek starts running at a certain height, let's hope it's not that, but there, we can have an idea, and we can do what's called time of travel of how long it actually takes to get into the river. We haven't got enough stations here, but we can use experts for that information to say, well, perhaps the runoff is a week away, and we can talk to the provincial experts as well. With the second part of the question, the funds, that's a very interesting question. I haven't got an answer for that one, I'm afraid. It's something we can think about, we can ask the province. There's also the responsibility of the property owner as well to think about these, but we will support you, and it's a very good suggestion.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm just wondering if you know when you might have the funding in place, or if you know how much funding is going to be in place, when you're going to have a real plan so that you can communicate that out to people so we can get on with our lives.
So you're speaking about the land acquisition and all of that?
Yeah, I happen to be one of those people affected.
Absolutely, yeah. What we haven't had a firm commitment from the federal government on the exact date the announcement will be. We're expecting about May. We also need to have an agreement in place with the provincial government for their portion of the funds, as well as for additional supports that Ron was speaking to earlier. So May is our known timeline. So there's a lot of work that we have to do before then to get ourselves ready for the framework to put it in place, so that once we get funding, we can start hitting the ground running. Between now and then, a lot of things are hypothetical or proposed, and I know a lot of people are tired of hearing us speak hypotheticals.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Sam. I'm just wondering if there's any housing projects coming up for the people that did lose their homes and are in motels and RVs.
Thank you. This is of some critical importance to the recovery program. There have been some proposals made to the provincial government around some aspects of immediate housing recovery for getting some rentals and that kind of going, and we're still waiting to see how we can work out a business case on that. There are some housing projects coming from BC Housing that would be later in the calendar year, or potentially in the new year before they're done. But right now, the flood recovery team and the housing team in particular are looking at how to make sure that we don't go into another winter with people not in homes. So whether it's their own home or a different one, there's several pieces that are really important. We just don't have the answers yet on them, but it's something that we're working on every day.
Still looking into it.
No, yeah, beyond that. Yeah.
Yeah, this is the question for the mayor. As you know, I live down north Johnson Flats, and our property's on the endanger list, and it's been flooded 2 years in a row. But still, our assessment up 20%, and we can't possibly sell our property or nothing for several years till people get over the fright of owning property down the floodplain. So I wonder if we're going to get any kind of tax relief, because as you know, the assessment goes up, the mill rate is based on the assessment. So I just wonder if we're going to get tax relief from the city on our property.
I'd like to refer this to Chris, who's been closer to this action than the tax rates.
Yes, your assessment went up.
20%. 20% it went up. The property's gone down because of the flood.
Well, then I would propose that you appeal the assessment.
That's what I'm trying to do, but they're not cooperating. They just said some property sold in our area, therefore people aren't afraid of flood, they said.
Well, that is, the assessments are prepared by the BC Assessment Authority. Right. And the city only uses their role to determine what the tax rates are going to be for a given year. That you are not, BC Assessment is not cooperating or willing to consider the fact that your home has been flooded, the value of your home has subsequently gone down, and they are refusing to even meet with you or consider it. I would go to your MLA, our MLA, and lodge a complaint that BC Assessment is, in your opinion, not being fair in adjudicating all of your, I guess, assessed values.
Yeah, because we've got our house, we tried to sell it last year before the major flood. We had the minor flood, our house was surrounded by water, and nobody would buy the house because of the flood. So now BC Assessment saying, well, they don't care. We fixed our house up because we had to fix it up to get insurance on the house or anything, because our insurance company wouldn't even insure the house until we had pictures of it being fixed up. And now because it's fixed up, And I try to tell them, like, nobody's going to touch our house for several years until they find out there's not going to be a major flood again. So I can't fight it. I talked to the guy twice over the phone, and he just said, well, there's a house sold in your area. Obviously, people aren't afraid of flood. And that doesn't make sense to me. And why should I pay a lot more taxes when I can't sell my house for nearly what it was 2 or 3 years ago?
I hear what you're saying. I'm sympathetic to what you're saying, but the city has no control over that.
So if they won't help me out, the city won't give any relief to people who are stuck in this position of having condemned our house is not condemned. It's basically right now it's condemned.
Well, I'm just going to give you a really quick answer because they want to move on.
Well, there's actually an answer from...
Oh, okay.
Hi, I'm Gina Burrows. I'm the government agent with the province of BC, with Service BC. You have 6 days, like right now on, the deadline is January 31st to file it for a property assessment review panel hearing. So today's the 24th. You have until the 31st to file for that. We have hearings in Grand Forks. I usually have them at the art gallery. We have a couple days worth. I can't remember off the top of my head what those dates are, but it's not too late. That panel has on it a BC assessment assessor, and it has panel members that are actually citizens also. So that is your opportunity to have that assessment that you received for 2018.
Because I've spoken to this Chris person on the phone twice, and he basically told me unless I have something new to come up with, he says we're sticking by what we did because property sold the area and people aren't afraid of flood and your house has been fixed up. And I explained to him, I said nobody's going to touch my house with a 10-foot pole for several years because they're afraid of flood. And he says, sorry, I can't help you, it's just that a house sold in your area and that's the amount the house sold for, and your house is equivalent to that house, therefore we're going to proceed with the 20% increase. This is the biggest increase we ever had, and this is the worst time it could happen. We're going to be at another $400 or $500 taxes.
All I can say is don't take that answer as the final answer. You have it's a regulation right to appeal that assessment. Apply for that opportunity to have that hearing and go from there. It doesn't cost you anything.
Because I got a piece of paper in the mail today, and all it is a form filling out my name and stuff and what I can tell about my property. But that's not going to explain.
But that's not for the appeal. You want
that's appeal. They sent me a piece of paper for appeal, like a two-page thing, and on top it has a few lines where you can write down why you think your house isn't worth it.
How about if you come to my office tomorrow, we can take
that's
it off.
That's at the art?
Service BC.
Service BC, okay.
So my question was going to be about the assessments as well, and what I'm curious of is, I know that nobody here actually would know, but the people of North Ruckle, some of the property values have gone right into the basement, and others have dropped just a little bit, and because of the state of not knowing what's going to happen with the buyout, whether there will be one, or how that's going to work out, is there any kind of advice you could, or information you could give them so that they can have some idea on how this assessment they got recently is going to impact on what they might get coming out the other end, or do you not know?
The assessments from BC Assessment are entirely separate from the appraisal for the buyout. So the Disaster Mitigation Adaptation Fund Infrastructure Canada requires a professional appraisal of the market value. We submitted both pre-flood and current market value information, and we're working on how all that works. It's entirely separate from the BC assessment process, which is if they update it, it might be a drive-by, it might be looking at some neighborhood stuff, but they don't always get the same level of detail that an appraisal does. The appraisal that we had done was just for grant application purpose. When we get down to the actual process, more information will be needed. It is basically, here's what we know right now to the level of an appraisal as opposed to an assessment. It's definitely a higher standard.
Yeah, because people are when they're wondering and they're worried, like there's so many things that go off of what people who don't live here think their value is, whether it's BC assessment and how will that affect what the BC government's input into this goes, or whether it's the insurance or the mortgage companies. Okay, thank you.
To get even more pointed on this, some of us that had our property values decrease are considering appealing to have them increased because we almost feel like this is a setup here.
They're independent. They're independent.
Yes, I was wondering who is the case manager that we need to go to talk to, and how do we contact this person?
Pass it right back to Rachel here, who coordinates the case managers.
Good answer.
Some of them are actually easy answers. That's good. Want it back first?
Clear cut logging, how does that affect our risk of flooding? Having no trees on the banks anymore?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if that's something that it's something that's beyond the scope of flood recovery to be looking at, and we're looking at the downstream effects of various things, including climate, snowpack, hydrology, that kind of thing. But maybe if Paul Edmonds could speak to this.
Yeah, I could just add a little bit to that. What the flooding you've seen is a combination of many factors. You know, from the snowpack, the weather conditions, the warm weather that comes through, the rainfall, the groundwater, the existing flows, you know, and land use. Clear-cut logging is very visible identification on the landscape, but the size of catchments are huge. If you mentioned trees alongside the river, they do have an impact of holding and stabilising riverbanks, and there's a whole green engineering that is well worth exploring in certain areas where the river, you know, bursts its banks and let the floodplain be the floodplain. But if you're looking at, you know, the forestry activities in different catchments, it's a small factor in such a large river catchment.
Thinking more about the sides of the hills where there would be trees that would be absorbing the rain, because a lot of this was brought on by the intense rainfall we had. And we didn't have any trees in a lot of those areas that were clear-cut to hold the water back, so it just ran down the mountainside right into the river, hence we had the flood.
Yeah, so clear cutting, when you look at the percentage cover of the whole catchment, the clear cut is actually a small percentage. You know yourself, the Kettle and Granby rivers are large catchment areas with lots of creeks. The actual clear cut forest operations are small percentages in that. If you look at a ploughed field, there will be more runoff from a ploughed field than a green field, if you look at that. But when you look at over the whole catchment, you've got to understand the scalability. It is a combination of factors. The most pressing factors was the weather. 230% snowpack with that warm weather that came through, that extreme rainfall, that runoff. The land couldn't take that water up because it was nowhere for it to go, whether there was trees there or not. But it's the percentage of that clear cut you've got to think about in the total catchment.
Besides that, my house is on Riverside Drive, and I didn't get any surface water, but my groundwater came up so bad it blew in part of my foundation. I repaired all that, and I got a 27% increase in my assessment. I phoned the assessment people 2 weeks ago and haven't heard back from them yet. That's our service.
Come see me.
Yeah, I think the BC assessment, you go through the appeal process that's there.
That's what I'm going to have to do, because nobody's gotten back to me yet.
I'm just going to do, it's 20 after now, I'm just going to do a quick time check, see, show of hands, how many more people have questions they'd like to address? 1, 2, because we've had a couple follow-on questions. So if we don't have a bunch more come up in the next 10 minutes, we'll try and wrap up around 7:30. If there's a bunch more that come up, we'll take it a little bit further, but it sounds like we're about right on track for that. So please go ahead.
Thanks, Graham. Barry Jarvis, excuse me. And I just want to follow up on the assessment as you live in Johnson Flats last year, and we've made no material changes to our house in the last several years. Last year I had a 16% increase in assessed value. This year I've got a 15% increase in assessed value. Substantial increases, but my frustration is with BC Assessment. I contacted them on January the 10th and have yet to have the courtesy of a reply. But I'll tell you how ridiculous this gets. I have a very good friend who's right in the middle of North Ruckle, and his assessment didn't change from a year ago, and yet he had 5 feet of water in his basement. So one has to question what guidelines that BC Assessment is using. They certainly haven't given me the courtesy of a response, and I'm fairly persistent, but they're not getting back to me. So maybe I need to go through this lady over here. I know where you live.
All right, so I want to invite Chair Russell if there's anything else you wanted to add in here from your recent observations. You good? You good?
I guess. Just very briefly, there's been a few conversations. We really talked a lot tonight about DMAF and how that fits in the process, but I think it's also important to remember there's a question back here at some point, you know, are we gonna pursue other options? And absolutely, I mean, that's why you see Ron and the provincial team here, is because we're pursuing other options. That's why you see all the city councillors here, because we're pursuing other. That's why we still have a flood recovery team, is because we're trying to figure out, to meet those objectives that we specified, how do we deliver this in the best way we can for the community. So absolutely, there's lots and lots of work still to come, and there's a lot of work going on.
Thank you.
Till next time.